let my work trips turn into secret weekends away. Now he's not taking me back. The title of this doesn't make me come off as anything but the bad guy. I know, but I needed to be honest. Putting the truth out there and telling this story to someone who will, hopefully, listen is all I have left. I've lost so much in the last few days. I didn't know what else to do but this. This story isn't about me looking for sympathy or forgiveness. I'm not trying to make it seem like I was innocent and didn't know what I was doing. No, I just wanted to get a chance to explain things my way, to make, at least some of, you understand that I didn't go out of my way to ruin his life, or mine, or our life together. I would never want that. When everything happened the way that it did, no one understood. No one wanted to understand. And now I've been left with no choice but to spill everything to strangers online. The thing is, and a lot of you will sympathize with this, my job is pretty hard. I was one of the head research scientists for a pharmaceutical company, and it took a lot of hard work to get to where I was, especially as a woman. When I decided to study biomedical science in college, I'd always imagined that I'd follow in my mother's footsteps and end up working as a forensic scientist, or maybe even become a professor like my father. I didn't believe I'd get to where I was, but I wasn't surprised when I did either. I studied hard and worked even harder. As I'm sure most of you know, or have at least heard, the science and medical field can be a bit of a boys' club. I mean, all high-profile fields usually are. Sometimes it's not only hard, but near impossible for women to succeed and make a name for themselves, but I was determined not to end up like the women that had come before me. I was determined to be successful and important. Like I said, it was hard. Not just the work itself, but all the steps it took to get there. It certainly wasn't easy to graduate magna cum laude from my college, or be a part of the top percentile of the graduating class of my PhD program, but I did it. If I sound proud, maybe even arrogant, it's because I am. What I did was no cakewalk, and I refused to pretend like it was, or downplay my achievements. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This isn't about my struggles as a woman in my field, although that would be an interesting story to tell too. This is about my marriage, what came before it, how it might be over, and what led to that. Being a research scientist meant that I was almost never in one place, or sometimes I would be in one place for a few months, and then suddenly be uprooted to go oversee that or test this or launch something. This meant that I almost never had the opportunity to put down any roots. Aside from a few apartments here and there that I leased and managed to decorate before I would inevitably have to leave because I'd been out of the city for too long, I didn't really have anywhere that felt like home. Except for my actual childhood home, of course. Sometimes when I was in between places and projects, I would live with my parents because it was easier and cozier than living out of a bag in a hotel room. This transient lifestyle of mine also meant that I struggled with my love life. I'd had a few relatively serious boyfriends in my early 20s, but once things in my job got a lot more intense, I had no more time for that. There have been casual agreements and flings here and there, people who kept me from feeling lonely and too stressed out, but never anything concrete, never anything serious enough to even call a relationship of any kind, much less throw around words like boyfriend or partner. I really don't want to further the idea that women have to pick between love and success because, for the most part, I don't think it's true. But the truth was that while my work life was great and I got to travel around, stay in 5-star hotels, and eat at expensive restaurants, I was incredibly lonely and the excitement of casual arrangements had lost their appeal. I was seriously considering agreeing to let my mom play matchmaker when I met the man that would be my husband. A new drug or treatment, I don't really remember, was being launched, and my company sent a few of us to the party to show support. Mike, male 35, was a tech engineer of some sort, and his company had done the same to him. After I had rubbed elbows with more than enough older men who downplayed my role and my work, I went to get some from air and found Mike smoking outside, a nasty habit that I had to force him to stop once we were together. He saw me when I stepped out, so there was no way I could pretend like I didn't see him and just walk past. I was forced to introduce myself. We made small talk, the usual nonsense you ask about and tell people in events like that. Our conversation reached that awkward part where we had run out of overly polite things to say, and I was about to use that to make my escape when he asked if I wanted to sit down with him. There was nothing I would have liked less, but obviously, I couldn't have told him that, so I agreed. But then we got to talking, and I was surprised to find that with the annoying pleasantries out of the way, I enjoyed talking to him. He told me that he recently left his old company because they were significantly underpaying him for his skills and had only been chosen by the new one to go to the event because he was still new. He asked what my job was like, and I told him. He laughed and told me that our jobs sounded pretty similar, and that while he didn't have to travel like I did, the work was pretty intense, and he often found himself spending more time at work than at home. I was shocked at how much I liked talking to him. The conversation flowed easily, and we had so much in common. So when he told me that he enjoyed spending time with me and asked if I wanted to do it again sometimes, I said yes. We exchanged numbers and I watched him leave. Dating Mike was something that took a bit to get used to. I was hardly ever in his city, which meant that we hardly ever saw each other physically. We mostly talked over the phone and on video calls. Sometimes, if it had been a while since we'd seen each other, Mike would catch a flight to where I was and spend time with me before I had to go somewhere else. It was difficult, but our relationship still flourished in its own way. We went on virtual dates and would talk to each other for hours before we fell asleep, sometimes while still on the phone. It was nice to have something and someone relatively stable. Life didn't feel so lonely anymore because I knew that I had Mike. It didn't take too long for me to fall for him. We dated like this for years, and eventually we developed more of a balance. I told my job that I needed to do less field travel work, and this allowed us to see each other more often. I could spend weeks to a few months with him before I had to go somewhere else, and it was so much more different than what I was used to, but I liked it in a way. Eventually, Mike proposed and we got married. The event wasn't anything too crazy. It was something sweet and simple, kind of like our relationship. After that, we bought a house together. I had to put in more requests for more lab work so we could be more present with each other, and for a while, everything was great. I was married to a man that I loved. I had a home that was actually lived in. I was still doing amazing at my job. But a few years in and things changed. Or maybe they didn't change at all, and I was only just starting to notice all the flaws. I became bored, which sounds like a nothing excuse, even a stupid one, for why our marriage got rocky, but it's the truth. I had gotten so used to constantly flitting about and traveling around that after a few years stuck in a lab and stuck in an actual house, I started to feel a bit caged in. I missed the uncertainty a little bit. I missed being in a new city or country every few months, and I missed undertaking projects with higher stakes. Lab work was fine and important, but it was monotonous and it had begun to drive me crazy. The stability that I had once craved and then liked now felt suffocating in its own way. There was also the fact that while I had significantly reduced the way work affected me and our relationship, Mike couldn't seem to do the same. He'd gotten a pretty big promotion at work around the time we'd gotten married, and it made him spend even more time at work. Sometimes I would get home, and hours later, Mike still wouldn't be back from work. It started to feel like there was no difference between coming back to the house then and when I used to come back to empty apartments and hotel rooms. And I started to resent him for making me limit my work for our marriage just for him to not do the same. Some of you will think that his actions justify what I did next, and some of you won't. It doesn't really matter now anyway. At the time I was angry and I felt slighted, and so I put in a request for less lab work. I told my job that I was ready to move around again, and when they agreed to it, I lied to Mike and told him that there was nothing I could do. Sometimes I feel justified and like he deserved it, and most times I wish I never did that. I wish that I just stayed where I was and talked to Mike about how I was feeling, because that request was like Pandora's box, and it's what would eventually lead to where we are now, with a relationship that's fractured and more unstable than it's ever been. It started during one of my work trips. Another scientist I worked with, Peter, started traveling with us. He was a chemical engineer and mostly worked in the lab, but the company was undertaking a new drug project in partnership with another company, so he was sent out to work with the other engineers. I'd met him before and had spoken to him a few times, but it was never anything serious. I wouldn't have called us friends, but we had the opportunity to talk and even bond during the project, which wasn't a rare thing. I often became friends with whoever I was chosen to work with during these projects. Peter and I became friends, and that was all we were for the longest time. But then the project wrapped up and the team decided to get drinks to celebrate. We sat together and talked as we drank, getting closer as we got drunker. Eventually, we decided to leave early, and we had to walk together because our hotel rooms were right across from each other's. He stopped in front of my door and said goodnight, but didn't pull away. I was drunk and happy, and it had been weeks since I'd seen Mike, days since I spoke to him. In that moment, when Peter kissed me, I didn't think of anything else or any of the consequences. I just kissed him back. We had sex that night, and in the morning, I told him that it could never happen again and kicked him out of my room. I debated for a long while about whether I should call Mike. After being together for so long, our marriage had long crossed the border from passionate into functional, but I still loved him, and I still felt bad. The rest of the team was scheduled to fly back in a few days, but I left early. It felt necessary to me to see Mike as soon as I could, but when I got back, he wasn't home. I waited till he got back and once again tried to decide if I was going to tell him or not. It felt like something that could definitely be forgiven. We were both a lot older and way too busy with our work to be affected by something as trivial as a momentary lapse in faithfulness. I knew that if I came clean, if I told him everything up front and explained that I was super drunk, there was a good chance that he would forgive me and want us to put it behind us. I knew that, and yet, when he came back home, I didn't say a word. He was gone a while, and I was left with nothing to do but think in that time. What happened with Peter was not only enjoyable, but it was exciting. I'd had sex with someone else in an expensive hotel in a foreign country. It felt illicit and forbidden, my own little secret, and I didn't want to give it up just yet. Despite the fact that I liked the taboo nature of what I'd done, I was serious about not doing it again. I thought I was anyway. I just thought that it wasn't worth the risk in the end to pursue a relationship like that, but soon enough, the high from my one night with Peter wore off, and I was craving excitement again. Something more than the rush of flights to new cities or luxurious hotels paid for with the company's money. I wanted something different. Maybe I wouldn't have done what I did if Mike had noticed that something was wrong, if he had tried to put aside his work like I had and give a little more attention to our marriage. In the beginning, his focus on work had been a good thing. I'd thought it was perfect that we were both workaholics. That way neither of us would ever feel ignored or neglected. But years down the line, and it was the thing that drove me into the arms of someone else. After that night, Peter kept trying to speak to me, to be near me, and I brushed him off at every turn, but then one day, I didn't. We started talking again, and it didn't take long before we were sneaking around at work every chance that we got. Fraternization and relationships were strictly against company policy, so we tried to be careful whenever we did, but eventually being careful didn't feel like enough. I was being greedy, I can admit that. I wanted my marriage, but I also wanted Peter. I wanted Peter, but I also wanted to keep my job. I had my cake, and I wanted to do all I could to eat it too. So we decided to restrict any romance between us to the work trips, when everyone would be too busy to care what we were doing, and where there was reduced supervision. That worked perfectly for a few months, and Mike remained completely oblivious. Sometimes I would go days without calling or texting him to see how he would react, but he barely ever did. Unfortunately, my boss would eventually limit Peter to lab work again, and then I was left scrambling trying to figure out a way to hold on to my affair. That was when I decided to just lie to Mike that I was being sent on work trips even during the weekend. Meanwhile, I was actually spending weekends away with Peter. I had to pay for most of these weekends myself, but I didn't mind. After years of working in the company, and years of them paying for my hotels and flights, I had more than enough to spend on myself and to spend on making sure that my secret stayed safe. It was a rush like I'd never felt before. The sneaking around, the planning trips right under Mike's nose. I never realized just how much of the excitement of cheating came from the running out and pretending rather than the actual act until I was the one doing it. Now, I know I sound like a monster, but I promise that I'm not. It's not like I wanted to punish Mike or completely destroy what we had. I was just being selfish and not really thinking about anyone else. That doesn't exactly sound better, but I just needed to stress that none of this was premeditated in any way. I mean, it would eventually become premeditated, but in the beginning it wasn't. Through all the planning and everything, I'd thought that I was some kind of genius, that I'd found a way to make everything work in my favor, as it always had before. But I was sorely mistaken. I never would have guessed that I would be the one to ruin everything and reveal all my secrets with my own hands, and in a way that I least expected to. After almost a year of my relationship on the side with Peter, I started to get bored of that too. In a weird way, I started to miss what I had before, the casual relationships with different people. And I started to wonder if maybe I just had a problem with being tied down romantically and what it could mean for my marriage if I did. Anyway, I ended things with Peter and tried to rekindle things with Mike again. Of course, he didn't know that I was trying to rekindle things. I'm pretty sure that up until what happened, he thought everything was just fine and that our marriage was going well. I noticed something strange in the weeks that followed after I got back from my last weekend with Peter, though. Mike was acting different. He started asking me questions about work, what project I was working on, and where I'd had to travel to for it, questions he'd never asked me before in all our years of being together. I had to lie to him for some of it, but I told him the truth when I could, so that he wouldn't get too suspicious. I thought that that was the end of it, that he'd just had this weird moment of curiosity, and he wouldn't bring up my work again. But then one night, I came back from work, and Mike was already home. I didn't think too much of it. It's not like it had never happened before. It was just very rare. I greeted him with a smile, but he didn't return it. Instead, he asked if I would sit down and talk with him. That caused me to panic a bit, but I tried not to let my mind get away from me. I sat down with him, and then I watched as he pulled out a credit card. My fear immediately switched to confusion. It was the card for the account that we both shared. We both had one. He was showing me mine. I asked him what was going on and why he was showing me the card. I held off on asking why he had it in the first place, since you remember putting it in my purse. He calmly told me that he had taken it from my purse because he needed to make sure that it had been with me all this time. That was when he revealed everything to me. I thought I was being so smart with my infidelity, and for the most part, I was. But I'd slipped up on my last trip with Peter, and instead of using my own card at the hotel, and at restaurants and everywhere else that we'd gone, I'd used the card of the account that we both shared. He told me that he wasn't sure what to make of the alerts that he kept getting on his phone for all the money being spent. At first, he'd thought that it was all for work, but then he remembered that my job never let me pay for hotels by myself, and he realized that the fancy dinners and drinks were only ever for two. The first thing he did was head to my office on a day that he knew I wasn't going to be there. He spoke to some of the workers. Most of them already knew that he was my husband, so they didn't hide anything from him, and asked them about the most recent work trip, but they were unsurprisingly confused and explained to him that there hadn't been any new trips or projects. He'd also gone through my things and my phone, where he found the card and several messages between me and Peter. All of this information he'd been gathering in those weeks that I was back. Those weeks where I'd thought that I'd successfully gotten away with it. More than upset at what my lying meant for our relationship, I felt upset that I'd been so overconfident. There was nothing I hated more than feeling stupid. I sat there quietly for a while, unsure of what to do or what to say. I thought about begging him, but then with that I'd run the risk of looking pathetic and him still deciding to leave. So instead, I tried to explain to him why I'd done it, and why it didn't have to affect our marriage. Hundreds of couples bounced back from cheating, and now they were stronger than ever. I was fully confident that we could be one of those couples. Besides, we were both too busy to start going through all the motions of a divorce. That's what I thought anyway, but Mike felt differently. He told me that not only had he already filed a divorce, but he'd also taken the liberty of forwarding some bank statements and messages between Peter and I to the HR office of my job. That was when my heart completely sank, and I hoped with everything in me that he was just trying to scare me, to make me feel bad. But he wasn't. Before he left the house and left me to my tears, he told me that I should expect a call from his lawyer and that I should get ready to clear out my office by Monday. I loved Mike. I really did, but the news of the divorce paled in comparison to my work. The weekend passed with me practically dazed and dreading Monday morning. Like Mike had said, I was asked to leave the company on Monday. All that I'd done for them and helped them achieve suddenly didn't matter anymore because I'd broken their pivotal rule. I had to pack up my things and leave the building. It was humiliating. It's been almost a week since then, and I've spent all my time at the house. For the first time in my life, I have no plan, and I have no idea what to do. I've lost it all, and I'm going to lose more if Mike follows through with his threats of divorce. But after what he did, I'm starting to think maybe that might be best for us. I don't know where to start or how to rebuild my life now. Everything's been ruined on the span of a few days. Is there any way to fix this mess? And does anyone know if I have legal grounds to file for wrongful termination?